It's Wednesday on the Lunduk Show, which means we do tech news, and I'm joined today by my buddy Paul Bibaud from over at Pogo Linux. Say hello to the whole universe, Paul.
Hello, universe.
Now would actually be a very good time to mention that the Lunduk Show is sponsored in part by Pogo Linux. That lovely logo that you see above us today, and that beautiful, beautiful man, that floating head sitting next to me, he's here to talk to us specifically about Meltdown and Spectre related things. So Paul, so over at Pogo, I mean, you guys do big, heavy compute intensive servers a lot of times. So I figure, you're kind of the guy to go to talk about this sort of thing. And I figure, what's the point of having totally cool sponsors if I can't demand that they come on my show from time to time to explain things? So Meltdown and Spectre. Let's everyone's kind of got a pretty high level just to make sure. Could you give a quick elevator pitch, Meltdown and Spectre, and then we'll kind of get into a couple of kind of update and detail things.
Yeah, well, it basically comes from the function that was built into the processors to help them execute a lot faster. They use what's called speculative execution, and essentially what that means is that, let's just say, for example, we're going to do a calculation for instance, let's just say if A is true. Okay, a very simple function, right?
It's a good one.
Well, what the processor will do, it will calculate, essentially it'll say if A is true, then compute function X, and if it's false, then compute function Y, right? Well, the processor will start executing on both functions until it figures out what A is, right? So it starts to pre-execute some of those calculations in order to basically just say, hey, it's kind of like doing tomorrow's homework today. It's like when you go to school tomorrow, it's going to be a good day because your homework is already done. Well, That's basically what the processor is getting away with. It's doing tomorrow's homework today.
Right.
Right.
It kind of, in a way, it feels a little bit like Precog from Minority Report, where they're kind of like thought deducing crime in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very, very much. So it is basically what the processor is trying to do is it is trying to predict the future. Right? By saying, well, if I can't predict the future, then I'll just do both calculations until I know what A is. And as soon as I know what A is, then I'll put all my resources into calculating the function related to what A is.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the kind of the thing there. The vulnerability comes in because we're using what would normally be volatile secure memory space becomes insecure because you have the processor looking at the memory spaces and basically a user level space, and both from a system level, a zero level root space.
Right.
So we're basically at the zero ring at that point. So it basically does take a local access user to insert a rootkit. I mean, you do have to have physical access to the box you want to exploit. This is not something that can be exploited remotely, and except in the case of possibly exploited remote management interfaces, things like Dell's iDRAC and stuff like that. And HP has what their version of it is called ILO. On the technology used in place there most of the time is called IPMI 2.0.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
Which allows a remote interface that gives system level access to the system. Okay.
Which sounds terrifying to people like me.
It's weird because in the data center space, people need that.
I guess that makes sense. I mean, I guess you would.
When you're managing thousands of systems, you can imagine what it could be like if you have to go to every system to do something to it.
You have to go to every system with a keyboard and monitor hooked up to each one.
Yes. I mean, you're back to crash carting, right? Now, I do know many organizations do keep their management network contained within the data center. It can't reach outside. So the data center guy can sit at his terminal and access any of the systems in the row.
Right.
But access from outside the data center can't get to that row through the management interface. It can through the standard data delivery network, which reaches outside, but the management network can't. Because last year there was a vulnerability found in the IPMI chips that were being used on Supermicro systems, that would basically enable someone coming in over the regular data network to access the IPMI chip and then actually get to system level resources.
That's terrifying.
So That since has been jailed, and so it's not a
good, good.
So, yeah, but it does lead to, if it's kind of one of those things where if that vulnerability still existed, then we would be able to actually remote to a system.
Then be in a world of hurt. Yeah.
That has not been Spectre patched, and actually insert a rootkit, or even if you don't want to insert malicious code, you can see memory spaces that you're not supposed to see. So you can actually get secure data and stuff like that. You could actually pull hashes from it if you wanted to, and then, obviously once you're in a system, you can leave a backdoor. That's pretty ezy. I mean, I think
that's an easy one.
Sysadmin 101 is some of the stuff you learn in the very, very early stage. What a backdoor is, and why that's not a good idea, right?
Ever.
So, yeah. So, where do we go from here? Essentially, is, how do we fix all this, right? Because the big problem, quite honestly, the first patch to come out from Microsoft for Windows-based systems actually worked really, really well, unless you have an Athlon.
Yeah, I saw that it bricked a bunch of the Athlons, didn't it?
Yeah, so the patches were kind of throwing fits into everything. So obviously that patch is going to have to get redone.
I would hope so.
Apple fixed their stuff up on January 3rd. I think they were actually the first ones to actually kind of have a full understanding of the problem and provide a fix. But the version of Linux that Google is using on their Chromebooks, that has been patched also. Firefox and Chrome have both been patched. Those releases are, from what I understand, done, but they will not be released until the 23rd. So another 6 days? Yeah, today's the 17th. Okay. So 6 days from today, Firefox and Chrome will have patches. That's kind of secondary importance to the OS patches.
Right.
So,
what do the Firefox and Chrome patches do? So since they're do you have any understanding of how those particular patches work? Because I kind of took a look at the Linux kernel patch, which had a delightful series of code names that I have immortalized one of them on my T-shirt, but I can't say now because there might be children watching. But the Firefox and Chrome patches, any idea on those? Oh no! Come on, internet. Oh no! There he goes. He's coming back. Come on, internet. He's coming. It was the internet. Yeah. Internet was mad for a second. All right. So the Firefox and Chrome patches. Do you have any inclination of how those work? Does it kind of use the same, the interrupt trampoline memory space bouncing thing that they did in the kernel, or?
It's not as crazy as the kernel. It's both of those browsers have prefetch mechanisms built into them. That is very, very. It kind of walks hand in hand with that speculative execution. They're basically, so when you open a web page, it has a bunch of links in it. They're pre-reaching out to the websites that have those links on them to make sure that there's links there, and that when you click a link, that the response is
really ready. Fast. Yeah.
Well, without doing that, then you have to click the link, and then you have to wait for the handshake, and then you have to wait for authentication and all that. And then
it's like we're in the Middle Ages of web browsing. That's craziness.
Yeah, stuff that doesn't just appear instantly on my screen. What the heck? I think, though, that all told, we are essentially with the slowdowns that we're going to see. We're basically going to be getting the performance we were supposed to get all along without cheating. Right. Okay. So let's just say, for example, these vulnerabilities were both ways that Intel was cooking processes into their processor so they could cheat a little bit and get some performance advantages. Well, we're just not going to cheat anymore, right? I mean, everybody's guilty of it, right? In the list of processors that are affected by this, it's a mile long. I mean, it goes back to it goes all the way back to processors that were coming out in the 90s. So. This is it's a long list. I mean, we're talking back in the day, the slot Celerons, those had it.
Yeah. Do they really?
Right? And so, yeah. So it goes. I mean, it goes way back. I mean, every version of the ARMS the ARM processors. Now, AMD is not as badly affected.
Yeah.
They basically do speculative execution, not to the same degree that Intel does, and their vulnerabilities lie more in the fact that the cache on the processor is accessible through a kit where, so it's the same type of thing where you got privileged space that can easily become exposed to a local user.
Okay,
and that's really the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's still bad, but not quite as severe on the AMD side. So, okay, have you guys done any tests like internally there to see like what the performance differences are with the patched operating systems at this point? I'm hearing like a million different reports about what the different speed hits are.
Yeah, the funny thing is we've only seen anywhere between like 5 and 15%, but most of our tests, actually to this day, all of our tests have been on Linux operating systems running open source applications. So, to say that maybe we're not quite as affected by it because Linux is a really awesome operating system.
Hey, let's go with that.
Applications are awesome too, right?
Win.
So all told, you're just better off.
Right.
I think the worst case scenario so far has been a slowdown of almost 20%, and that
it's significant, but it's not as bad as the doomsday that we've heard from some.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, we're not talking end of the world type stuff here. It's
right.
It's a nuisance, really, and we're looking at upwards of say 20% of a drop when it was CentOS 7 with Postgres.
Interesting.
Yeah, the Postgres database just did not. I don't know what it's doing differently, but we've run a number of different database, open source database suites through our testing, and that one was the worst.
Interesting. So Postgres is doing a lot of extra system calls or something like that.
It would have to be because that's where the slowdowns reside. Right. So userland calls, data calls and stuff like that. Those aren't affected by the vulnerability. So it's just when the system is going to the kernel is when you have the vulnerability slowdown affect you. And so maybe Postgres is just a little bit more into the system than we're happy about.
Right, they're monkeying around in the depths of
I'm not an expert on that particular topic.
Yeah, me neither. So that works.
Are we having internet problems again?
I see you just fine. Are you seeing me? You seeing me?
Yeah, I am. You stop moving every once in a while, and I don't know whether you're messing with me.
Let's just assume I'm messing with you, just to make it more entertaining. All right, so let's see. Okay, so this is all pretty fair. Where do we go from here in terms of like the next round of chipsets? So like AMD and AMD's obviously going to be iterating on their Ryzen and Epics and everything else, and Intel's got their next round of stuff coming out. What are we looking at from them? Do we get fixes coming from them, changes? How does that work going forward?
It is my understanding that Intel will introduce a new chip architecture that does not have this vulnerability in the version of the Intel Xeon processor that comes out 2 generations from now. So the next one will still have it.
Okay.
Yeah. The one after that will not have it.
Gotcha. Man, I get that. It's already in the pipeline. It's already, moving along, but man, that's going to be a big PR hit.
Well, yeah,
their marketing folks have got to be cranky.
Yeah. It kind of makes you wonder, there have been a number of possible uglinesses from Intel that, you look at a lot of their senior leaders dumped a bunch of stock right before the vulnerability was announced. And you kind of wonder, is that, are we screaming that the sky is falling? Are we being Chicken Little here, or is it more like Well, that was their window, so they used it.
Right.
And that's what smart people do, right? I mean, they only get certain windows throughout the year where they're able to actually sell their stock.
Right. It could totally just have been coincidence. It could have been coinky dink.
I didn't pull 10Ks or filings or anything like that to see if they had done the same thing in previous windows throughout the year. But you know, look, anybody who is smart enough to have become CEO of Intel knows how to manage their own money. And I think if they probably,
Most likely.
I'm just kind of going on erring on the side of the good and assuming it was an available window and they took advantage of it because they wanted to diversify their portfolio. I don't think
it smells funny. I think because we live in a time when everything kind of smells funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I'm not going out with the pitchforks and the torches just yet. I'll just kind of sit back and hang and wait. All right. So this is, if you right now, like if you're an average home user, and you are in the market for a new machine right now, does any of this really factor into your decision of what sort of chipsets you go for? Do you go for an AMD right now because of this? Do you not worry about it because the OSs are all getting patched appropriately, but you just factor in the 15 however much percent potential speed loss? How do you approach that as just an end user?
I honestly, for a home user, I wouldn't worry about it at all. I would just kind of let the world be. I mean, there's really not a whole lot you can do about it except for
it's just kind of the reality of the world we're in right now. Yeah,
it's the world we're in, so live in it. You know, that's kind of
Yeah.
So, hey, completely off topic. I just know, is that a TRS-80 Model 100 over your shoulder?
Sure as hell is. That is a Model 100. One of the fans of the show sent that in after I was talking about futzing around with it, and I've been working on getting the disk drive working, and I have a Wi-Fi modem on it, so I can telnet into my main machine here, load up web browsers on my machine here, and use that to browse the internet via W3M. It works, baby. It's perhaps the most ridiculous project I have ever endeavored on, but it brings me many smiles. Once I get it working well enough, I'll do a video around it, which literally zero people will find useful. It will merely be amusement that Lunduk did such a thing, but I am enjoying myself with it.
Well, just remember, I recognized it. So that means there's other people that recognize it. So there's other people that maybe. When I was a kid, my best friend, his dad had one of those, and
so beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they're so beautiful. I mean, they came out. They were like $4,000 or something like that when they were first released. They were crazy, but
an 8-row screen. But it had batchable memory. I remember writing code in BASIC on it and actually being able to save it to a patch.
See if the screen can catch this. If you look at it, what's really crazy is it shows you the memory in bytes free. So it actually shows you, like right now I have 29,117 bytes free. Like it doesn't even bother to truncate that down to kilobytes. It's just like, this is how many bytes you have. Every time you hit a key, that number gets smaller. It's like a countdown to Armageddon, and it's crazy. So I can use the tapes, the cassette tapes, to pull data off on here, and I've got these 3.5-inch floppy disks. There's a battery powered floppy drive that came with this thing, or you could get as an extra thing, and they hold they're the smallest density 3.5s. I have not been able to find a place where I can actually get 200K 3.5-inch floppies. It's proving challenging on that front, but it's still a hell of a lot of fun. Don't want that falling over. I love that little beauty.
Sorry for hijacking the show.
No, man. I will talk about a TRS-80 Model 100. That's actually a 102, the slightly upgraded version with a slightly better keyboard. But oh man, it's just delightful. All right. Let's talk about some of the random news from the week, because there is some very bizarre news items this week, and some of these have been reported ad nauseum, but I have a couple of specific takes on it that I thought might be kind of fun. Let's talk about the Hawaii thing just momentarily, because it's so darn entertaining. So I've got the screenshot up on the screen. You can't quite see it here, Paul, but from the whole Hawaii whoops-a-daisy, I accidentally pushed the button that told everyone we were about to get missile struck in Hawaii thing. Well, everyone's reporting it on as a drop-down menu that had 2 items. Turns out it wasn't actually a drop-down menu so much as a page with links on it. And if you look at the page, it really is the most confusing set of links that do things I have seen in a long time. A few of them are bolded, some of them are not. They have PACOM CDW state only and drill PACOM CDW state only. They're right next to each other, and they're also below 1 test message and multiple other random messages that don't really mean a whole hell of a lot to me. But yeah, it is like the worst user interface in the world. I love that they put such a critical thing on what is clearly a very strange web page.
and that is the interface that the user uses to send out the alerts.
Yeah, this literally is from their computer screen, and where this gets even better, in my opinion, I don't know if you guys have seen this. Over on businessinsider.com, they have a great article with a picture, and the headline for the article reads, "A password for the Hawaii Emergency Agency was hiding in a public photo written on a post-it note." They literally have this publicity photo of the machines that can do this, and at the bottom of the screen it said, "Password warning point 2 apparently is the password," or something like that. It's kind of funkily scribbled, but right below the screen of the type of machines. Oh my God. All I know is Hawaii is probably going to be doing an overhaul of their IT infrastructure very soon. As if I had to guess. And also, these screenshots have also revealed that they are in fact running Internet Explorer, Windows, and Microsoft Outlook on their emergency warning machines with a password of warning point 2. So that's information that we all now have in the public. So this couldn't possibly cause problems for any of us in the rest of the world. Just good God. So I just had to bring that up because it was ridiculous. Here's kind of an interesting thing. So there's an article over on Ars Technica talking about municipal broadband. And I kind of thought this was cool. So the headline is, "City-owned internet services offer cheaper and more transparent pricing." This actually was kind of interesting. I'm going to read a tidbit here from a report on this because they actually did a study of the various pricings of municipal broadband. It reads as follows, and this is all from the Ars Technica article. "We found that the most commonly owned fiber-to-the-home networks charged less and offered prices that were clear and unchanging, whereas private ISPs typically charged initial low promotion or teaser rates that later sharply rose, usually after 12 months. We were able to make comparisons in 27 communities. We found that in 23 cases, the community-owned fiber-to-the-home provider's pricing was lower when averaged over 4 years. Using a 3-year average changed this fraction to 22 out of 27. In the other 13 communities, comparisons were not possible, either because the private provider's website's terms of service deterred or prohibited data collection, or because no competitor offered services that qualified as broadband. We also made the incidental findings that Comcast offered different prices and terms for the same service in different regions." And then they had actually a chart where they listed the price differences between municipal broadband and the companies providing it in different areas. In Lafayette, Louisiana, this was kind of interesting. You were looking at a 50% annual savings over using KTC, and like 35% over Cox in Michigan, and some place called Sibawang. They're looking at a 43% savings, so like a difference of $350 a year, and it just kind of goes down from there. But it's all like 15, 20, 30% cheaper for the municipal broadband. And I hadn't really thought about this much because we don't have that here. And I've never lived in a spot where I actually got municipal broadband. So I never really think about it that much. But should places have municipal broadband? Should, like, you're over in Western Washington there. Should the cities that you're in Western Washington provide a municipal broadband service? Should they do that?
Well, the funny thing is that the cities right now, I think the only city that I know of that's actually doing a broadband project is up in Bellingham.
Are they doing one up there?
Yeah, so the Linux Fest Northwest guys could probably chime in a little bit.
They probably could.
A little bit more than I could, considering that's their town.
Yeah, they know. Yeah.
But from what I understand, it's Bellevue or Bellingham is actually doing a thing where they're putting free Wi-Fi almost everywhere.
Really?
I mean, within the city limits, I think there's Wi-Fi just about everywhere. So, it's not like they're providing, broadband to your front door or
but it's
fiber
just,
front door.
they're just
but
blanketing the city in Wi-Fi.
to put Wi-Fi in the air, that's, to me, that's smarter because you don't have to go digging up the roads.
That is kind of smarter. Yeah.
And for the most part, Wi-Fi is
fine. Right?
Right.
Agreed. I mean, for most people, Wi-Fi cuts. I mean, hell, most laptops you buy nowadays don't even have an Ethernet jack anyway. So you're going to be going over Wi-Fi no matter what. So what's the big loss? I mean, like for me here or you guys in a data center, having a nice, wired connection's nice. But for most people and for most things I do, you're right. Wi-Fi totally cuts it. I could almost do with a slightly slower, like, mesh Wi-Fi network covering all of, like, the town I live in, and that would cover most of my needs pretty well. I don't know. I guess, I'm kind of a free market kind of guy, most of the time. But I look at this and I'm like, I kind of wish the towns, like water services, like most towns handle the water services for their towns or their counties. Not all, but most. Internet's kind of close to that. I need internet just as much as I need water, it feels like. So why not make the city do it? I don't know.
Yeah, I think you'll find that pretty soon in our lifetime, we'll get to the point where internet access is considered a basic utility. Right? I mean, we have come to the point where, it is perfectly acceptable to have, to consider cable television a utility.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I mean, I'm talking like anytime, people are under scrutiny for how they spend their money and stuff like that, to have cable TV listed there is not a moral sin or anything like that. Right. It's just kind of one of those things, so internet should be coming up, on the heels of that. You would think that the internet would be coming up pretty quickly as something that would be, it's becoming darn near a necessity. We are getting to the point now where, well, look at it like this. Authorities, they like to be able to assume that they can send you an email and you will get it.
Yeah. But if you don't have internet access.
Right. They want to be able to do things by email. Right. So you end up in court on a failure to appear because they emailed you. You can say, well, I don't have internet at home.
Right. Because Comcast is too pricey. So I don't. Yeah.
So, to have something, that it kind of like a fallback, for right now, I would say probably 10 or 15 years from now, it'll be a lot more common I'm starting to see, like, around here in Redmond, internet is included with a lot of apartments.
It is.
And stuff. Now, I mean, I haven't been around in a really, really long time, but when you're driving along, you see free Wi-Fi signs on these apartments they're newly built, they're brand new construction, and they've got these big signs say free Wi-Fi on them.
Right.
I mean,
I mean, hell, it's weird to go to a restaurant that doesn't give you free Wi-Fi. Like, it's bizarre. Like, I was at a pizza joint the other day, and I pulled up my laptop, and I'm like, where's the Wi-Fi? Like, it was very confusing to me.
Well, there is one coffee shop here in Redmond that actually blatantly has signage that says, there is no internet here. Read a book. and they're one of those coffee shops that's basically got like a library of books on the walls and just go grab one.
That's kind of cool. Yeah, I get that.
I think it's one of those, they don't necessarily want people camping out on, because you can't go into a Starbucks nowadays without seeing at least 5 or 8 people sitting at their laptops having video chats with other people, and there's a little bit of a din because of all the noise from everybody's conversations from all their Wi-Fi use.
It does get kind of annoying. Yeah,
it can be. I mean, you see like sales guys on the road and stuff like that, kicking it in Starbucks with their headsets on, and they're yelling at people on their computer and stuff like that. And I mean, come on, this is a coffee shop, it's supposed to be kind of a little bit relaxing and stuff like
chill,
that.
dim lighting, like I can just sit back. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the guys that do the no Wi-Fi place around the corner, they're a cool bunch. They're a little.
You got to take a stand somewhere.
Well, they also sell, all the food they offer is gluten free, and granola, tree hugging, incense, and all that stuff they got going on there.
Bunch of hippies.
They dig it. Read a book. You don't need the internet here. That's their thing.
Honestly,
but I can see it coming. Where I think municipal Wi-Fi. I think it's a good idea.
I do too.
Yeah. I mean, to have, and I'm not saying that I want to be catered to by the government or anything like that, or handed anything. But I do think using the internet as a service that the city can provide at either free or relatively low cost.
Yeah, something cheap. It doesn't have to be crazy fast, but something that allows people to do the basics, to be able to send emails and whatnot. I mean, this would be nice.
Get online to get the information they want, or to look for a job, or to send resumes out.
Yeah,
things like that. And now you don't have a bunch of you don't have like the entire unemployed cast hanging out at the library trying to get on the computer to get online, so they can send their resumes out. I think the whole thing is a massive positive. I don't see where anything can be.
I agree.
I don't see where any harm or bad can be done by cities providing Wi-Fi.
I mean, I know the folks like Comcast and CenturyLink and whatnot. They don't love it a whole hell of a lot, but I can't think of anyone else that suffers. Like I can't think of, like, this isn't something where like I get hurt because there's nice, free or cheap Wi-Fi in the area. Like I just don't.
Yeah. Well, some people will go for it. I'm kind of the mind that some people will go for it. Some people will have no choice, right? Yeah. Those that can't afford to be able to buy, Comcast internet. It's expensive. I'll hand it to you. It is. It's not cheap.
Yeah.
And when the choice comes between having that and something that is, basically what it comes down to is, if you want wicked fast, you got to pay for it.
Yes, exactly. Something very basic, blankets the area, and then for folks like you and me who want to be able to have a nice 100 megabit up and down fiber link, okay, so we have to shell out a little bit. I'm okay with that. Total unrelated side note. So I've got Frontier Fios coming in here, right? So I've got a nice little fiber uplink, which means my internet connection's fantastic. However, Frontier has the rights to the lines around here for the plain old telephone service, the old copper network. So I wanted to bring in a bunch of POTS lines so I could have old school copper telephone lines to run analog dial-up BBSs out of the studio here. Still pulling teeth with them. I've been in a constant slug out fight and negotiations with Frontier trying to figure that they don't run copper lines anymore. They don't run plain old telephone lines anymore. And I'm in a slightly newer neighborhood. And I'm like, no, you got to do it. So I found laws on the books that say they have to do it. And they really, really don't want to. So I'm trying to get it to do it because I really want to have dial-up BBSs, because my BBS is connected via Telnet. But how cool would it be if people could also locally dial into it with an old like 14.4 modem or whatever, just because I just want it, because I know I don't need it. But man, it's like pulling teeth, getting some of these older technologies that we've been using for like 100 years to be used nowadays. It's amazing to me. I don't know how I feel about it.
I ran a BBS when I was a kid out of my house. Answering the phone, hearing the fax noise, putting the phone in the acoustic coupler, and then hitting the keystroke so my user could get in the system.
Yeah.
And until I had a card modem. Once I got a card modem, then
That is just
it would
auto.
answer.
Yeah.
It was all good. But yeah, it was. I mean, those are really, really fun days. And I remember we used to, because I ran a mirror of a BBS that 4 or 5 other guys had copies of, and we used to have meetups every Sunday. We'd meet at the library and exchange floppy disks with everybody's email on them, so that if somebody logged into Mike's computer and left a message for me, then Mike would take that floppy disk, and then I would copy it onto my computer, so that if somebody logged into my computer, they would be able to
hardcore networking. Yeah.
Right. So we were kind of sneaker netting this whole email system, and this was 1982.
Yeah.
Probably we were doing that.
That's
and
awesome.
Actually prior to that, because I remember I was in junior high, so probably like 79 or 80.
Nice.
Probably better.
That's so cool. Yeah, see, I got into BBSing much later. After I didn't have to do the ferrying around on floppies thing. I did the nightly dial out to FidoNet and whatever other dial up message network my BBS was on at the time. And those were good times. I just really want to have that. No practical value other than the internet goes out and people can dial into a BBS. Like there's there's no real value to it. But man, I just want that. That's a total digression.
Imagine the value of that network in a post-apocalyptic society.
Totally.
That's where you were going with that.
You know it is. You totally know it is. All right. Plus, I want to be able to be down like at a shop somewhere and use that old TRS-80 Model 100 with a 300 baud modem to connect to my BBS, which has a telnet and email bridge, and I can send emails that way. I feel like that's amazing, and I'm not really sure why. All right. I have to mention this because it's changed enough that I feel like it's worth mentioning. The chart on the screen, for those of you watching the video version of this, is the price of Bitcoin over the last over the last week or so, where it has lost more than 1/4 of its value in the last week. I don't really have much to say about this other than, oh my gosh. The cryptocurrencies, the big ones, are all tanking right now over the last week, especially over the last 2 weeks. And it panics me a little bit, just because I don't like seeing anything tank. Whenever I see any sort of currency tank, I start to get a little bit nervous. But it's not like I have like $1 million sitting in Bitcoin, but just the same. Woof, 25% down is a lot. Like,
was there a event?
Not that I'm aware of. It's just kind of some people were saying it was due for a market correction. Other people are saying this is part of the pattern. So the Bitcoin pattern has always been that it shoots up and goes back down a little bit, and then it shoots up. And then it goes back down a little bit. And that's kind of what it did like 4 or 5 times in a row. And so back at that big spike was at the beginning of December, where it like shot up close to 20,000 and everyone was like, hot damn. And then everyone's like, okay, it's going to go back down, but just a little bit, then it'll go back up again. And it hasn't done the go back up part. Now it's just kind of like it went down, plateaued for a little bit, spiked around a little bit, and then went back down again. So now we've broken out of that cool pattern that was making people money, and now we're into the losing people money thing. Like, so if someone got in to Bitcoin when it was close to 20K, they've lost half their money in the last month alone, assuming they sell. I'm not really sure. Half of my friends are adamant that Bitcoin is the worst idea ever, that all cryptocurrencies should die and they're awful. And the other half of my friends believe that it is the second coming of monies and is the only way forward and the only way to save us as a human race. I'm somewhat in the middle where I am very uncertain. Do you invest in the cryptocurrencies?
Well,
yeah. See, me too. Like that much. Yeah.
Just to be a player. But
yeah,
to give me a reason to look at it. But I'll give it to you straight. If all that money went away, it's not very much.
That's fair.
But I don't know whether I'm either becoming a grumpy old man or not, because and that's just simply because I refuse to believe that this shit is real. It just sounds like somebody made something up and all of a sudden it just turned into money. And I've never, ever, ever heard of anyone that was actually truly successful at just manufacturing money.
Right.
Right.
I mean, I mean, I could easily break into something political as we start talking about the Fed and whatnot. But
Well,
I have a thing. Like when I look at, so I mean, I've got like this dollar bill here, right? This is a little dollar bill. It's a $1 bill. I know that this little piece of paper has really no material value, you know, like it may like a penny or whatever the hell it is. It's not worth much. It's what it represents, right?
yeah.
Now if I have like a real coin, like a gold coin, I can say that's a gold friggin' coin. I can trade it for booty on the high seas or whatever. You know, it's cool that way. I don't necessarily trust the little paper monies, and I even less trust a crypto hash. like like it's just like, what does this
Yes.
represent? Like I want my money to be like real. Like if I could, I'd literally walk around with a sack full of gold and silver coins. Like that would do it for me. That's how I would buy my bagels in the morning, is just with little, and I do it in the old days where they literally, like in Britain, used to like chip parts of the coin off and say, oh, here's a half of a pence, and they just clip it off and here's a half of it. Like that's what I would do, because it feels real. I don't know. That's just me.
Well, yeah. I mean, the cryptocurrency is kind of like it just kind of poof come out of nowhere,
Kind of.
right? So there wasn't any exchange in order for that money to come into being. That there was nothing that brought it about except some mathematics, right? So some guy, and I don't know the in-depth story of Bitcoin, but basically to me it looks like some guy made this thing up and turned it into money, and everybody believed it, so now it's worth something.
One person
Right?
described it to me as a mechanism by which you turn electricity into money. It's almost like it's alchemy, except not lead to gold, electricity into money.
Yes.
Like it's, yeah, which I mean, kind of, yeah. I mean, John McAfee's got up in Yakima, I believe, a warehouse he picked up where the electricity is crazy cheap. That's literally just like he's involved in this company that's just a mining company with this crazy cheap electricity
Yep.
to earn profit mining. And it just feels like it's one step removed from clicking on things in Farmville. That Which is weird. I know that's a very weird thing. Paul's totally frozen again, but he froze. It was great. The internet froze for a second while I was talking, but it froze with a face where you were just like my mom disapproving of what I was saying. It was perfect. Anyway, so moving on from that, I felt like that just had to be mentioned. To get into the I wear a tinfoil hat stuff just a little bit more, there's an article up over on Tech Dirt from Tim Cushing that was specifically talking about the FBI's and NSA's and a few other institutions' feelings towards encryption. And I'm just going to read you an excerpt from this because I found this to be interesting. Ray expanded his anti-encryption rhetoric last week, big guy at the FBI, at a cybersecurity conference in New York. In short, encryption is inherently dangerous. And the FBI boss will apparently continue to complain about encryption without offering any solutions. Those are Tim Cushing's words. And then here's the quotes in here. The Federal Bureau of Investigation was unable to access data from nearly 7,800 devices in the fiscal year that ended September 30th, with technical tools despite possessing proper legal authority to pry them open, a growing figure that impacts every area of the agency's work, Ray said during a speech at a cybersecurity conference in New York. The FBI has been unable to access data in more than half of the devices that it tried to unlock due to encryption, Ray added. This is an urgent public safety issue, Ray added, while saying that a solution is not so clear-cut. On Wednesday, at the International Conference on Cybersecurity in Manhattan, FBI forensic expert Stephen Flatley lashed out at Apple, calling the company quote, jerks and, quote, evil geniuses for making his and his colleagues' investigative work harder. Honestly, if I worked at Apple, I would absolutely make sure I add evil genius that's like as like a name badge or something like on my door, because once the FBI calls you an evil genius, you have to just embrace it. It continues, for example, flatly complain that Apple recently made password guesses slower, changing the hash iterations from 10,000 to 10 million. That means, he explained, that password attempts speed went from 45 passwords a second to 1 every 18 seconds, referring to the difficulty of cracking a password using a brute force method in which every possible permutation is tried. At what point is it just trying to one-up things, and at what point is it to thwart law enforcement, he added. Apple is pretty good at evil genius stuff, he said. I just love these quotes so much. I know, right? I know. You did the exact same thing I did when I read this.
You cannot make that up. Oh my goodness.
I mean, how many times have I made fun of Apple, and how many times have I called them names? Sure, but this is the FBI. I'm a schmuck on the internet. This is literally two different people at the FBI calling Apple evil geniuses who were working to thwart law enforcement. I just like, as many things as I want to say bad about Apple, I just don't necessarily. I don't envision Tim Cook as sitting on a skull-shaped volcano island somewhere in the Atlantic, cackling to himself about thwarting the FBI. Like, it just like right. Anyway, I kind of feel like my commentary on this is self-evident and needs no further explanation, but holy moly. Anyway, moving on. But seriously, according to the FBI, Apple are, and I quote, jerks. So there is that. And then to further on with the "everybody is watching you" theme of today, the Washington Post had an article that a bunch of other outlets are picking up, which is, I'm glad people are running with these stories. Big Brother on Wheels: why your car company may know more about you than your spouse. Which is a very ridiculous headline, but the one quote from there is kind of interesting. The article reads, this is from the Washington Post: there are 78 million cars on the road with an embedded cyber connection. People got to stop using that phrase. A feature that makes monitoring customers easier, according to ABI research. By 2021, according to the technology research firm Gartner, 98% of new cars sold in the United States and in Europe will be connected, a feature that is being highlighted this week here at the North American International Auto Show in Detroit. That's a pretty good point. So, and the article kind of goes on to show some of the data that tends to be collected. And some of it makes a certain amount of sense, like, gas mileage collecting over time, sensors, the O2 sensor in your car and various other sensors, these sorts of things. It also can monitor, it also monitors, like, if you have your seatbelt on or didn't. That way, if you get into an accident, it could, may affect your insurance, these sorts of things. How fast do you drive? These can also impact your insurance. But it also, many of these cars are actually monitoring your weight. So because they measure the total weight pressure that's on the shocks as they exist when you're in and out of the car. So over time, the car companies actually know, within a reasonable variance, your weight over time. So they know where you're going. They know when you're going there. They know how much you weighed before and after each trip. So if you go to Red Robin, grab a Royal Burger and all you can eat fries, come out 3 pounds heavier, the car company actually knows that. I think this was kind of interesting, and some of the car companies, have made statements saying they will be very good stewards of this data, and of course they would do nothing mean with it. One security researcher pointed out that eventually they'll have so much data that will be so valuable, they'll kind of be compelled to do something with it. Otherwise, their shareholders will get mad.
They'll have to. They would absolutely have to. I mean, look, your browser is already using what you search for to put ads in front of you.
Yeah.
Now imagine you go to the grocery store, and let's say your favorite grocery store is Safeway. You go into Safeway, you buy your stuff, you walk out of Safeway, you get in your car to drive away, and all of a sudden there's ads on the radio for Safeway.
Yes. Right.
Right. Or they know where you are and they start putting ads in front of you for what's coming up.
Yeah. Yeah. And you could make a case for that being handy, but
on the right. You know, could you imagine you're listening to tunes, a commercial break comes on, you know, and hey, for those of you who just happen to be in, you know, a purple Dodge Charger on I-5 near mile marker 71, coming up on your right is the outlet malls, and on your left is, you know, I mean, do you really want
the car would be like, I know you haven't gone out to eat in a couple of days. I noticed you like burger joints, but you haven't been to Five Guys all week. I mean, how do they not?
Would you like to navigate to Five Guys right now?
Yeah.
Bing, and now right?
Turns out the car is also self-driving. It's just going to take you there. It is terrifying to me. All of that is so profoundly terrifying to me. Oh,
well, we said we want choices. We're going to get them, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's when choices start getting made for us, I think, is when, you know, that's when the big revolt happens. But for right now, you know, it's fun to speculate on. That's for sure.
It's really fun to speculate on. Fun/amusing/terrifying. Yeah,
kind of all at the same time. Yeah,
kind of all at the same time. It's kind of like a roller coaster not wearing any seatbelts. It's very, very fun, especially if you don't die. Man, holy moly, and you know, this has been coming for a long time. Like, it started kind of with the OnStar stuff, you know, like when they started putting OnStar in cars and services like that, it served a valuable purpose, you know, help keep people safe, let people get in contact with people in a hurry. Those are good things. I don't have any problem with that. But, oh, man.
Well, what about the things that the insurance companies are selling now? The little ODB2 modules put in your, and so they can monitor your driving habits and determine your rate based on that. Right?
Can't they just determine it based on me not getting into an accident? What's wrong with the old ways?
You know, I mean, hey, I drive like a maniac, but I drive, you know, I'm like on country roads most of the time.
Right. You know? Yes. Bingo. Yes, so, absolutely.
I mean, seriously, I can leave my office and get to my house without passing another place of business at all. Not a store, not a gas station, or nothing. There are routes that I can take from my office to my home that, you know, once I'm basically out of the office area,
your little office complex area.
Once I'm out of here, I'm in the boonies. I mean, seriously.
It feels like there should be very different rules and expectations around that. You know, it's like it's different than if you're driving past 3 elementary schools downtown. That's a very different setup.
Well, there's a strip of road right down the way that's part of my favorite part of the drive.
Uh-oh. Come back. Oh, internet. He was telling me about his favorite part of the drive. What are you doing to me? There he goes. There he goes. Internet's back. Internet's back. Oh, you were telling me about your favorite part of the drive, and then it was gone.
Okay, well, it's about a 2.5 mile stretch across a valley that's got a little bit of a rise where the bridge is. So if you're going a little too fast, you might catch air. But for the most part, yeah, I mean, I have a fast car. I like to drive it fast, and it's fun.
Do you occasionally catch air?
Occasionally, yeah.
Nice. See, yes. Anyway,
but I think I have the right to do that. I'm not causing anyone else any harm. It's not like
yes, exactly.
Like you were saying, it's not like I drive 90 miles an hour past, you know, in a school zone.
No, right. I mean, you use your reasonable common sense, but these sort of automated systems really can't do that all that well. And man, if
they're entirely binary. That's what it is. It's either you're speeding or you're not.
Right.
You know. So to that end, I think, you know, the insurance companies have a little bit of ways to go on getting that technology right for use, you know, and allowing some variances and stuff like that. But
If I
for
was
right
the
now.
insurance company, I wouldn't worry about getting it right. I mean, it's in their interest to ding you, right? Like they
Yeah, that's
make
true.
more money, more they ding you. So if you speed, I would just keep it as a binary if I were them. You speed,
Yeah.
ding, speed, ding, and it doesn't matter where you are. That would be my take on it. If I was an evil genius, that's the route I would take. And I was thinking about this. And I was thinking about the number of devices, and I did a really, really ridiculous, but technically factual. The Internet of Things is going to destroy us all speech at the Embedded Linux conference. Was it last year or the year before? And I calculated out based on the current analyst statements of how many devices will be out there that are internet enabled and connected. And it's in America alone, I think it was something like 14 per person over the next 5 to 10 years. Like just in terms of just general, in some houses it's many, in some places it's much less, but that was just like the average. You add that on top of it, internet connected and often controlled cars on top of that, and the sheer number of devices actively collecting data on us and connecting it to the internet with some form of external control is really, really terrifying to me. I'm just really happy that these types of articles are appearing in mainstream publications, and it's not just crackpots like Lunduk spouting about them right now. So that alone makes me happy. I'm just happy about it.
I mean, but obviously with any one of these scenarios, you know, you're looking at, you know, obviously the slippery slope fallacy comes into play, right? We have to look at what does happen at the next step. And does the next step enable the next step, and so on, right? So let's take, for example, the discussion we were having about the little module in the car. Okay. Well, what happens when health insurance companies start monitoring what's in your fridge?
Right.
And they want to ding you because you like crappy food.
I like my freezer pizzas. Yeah.
You don't eat well, so we're going to charge you more. Right. I don't see any fresh produce in your, you know, in your fridge. All I see is dairy products. All I see is dairy products and things that come in a box.
Yeah.
You know,
you have nothing but 5 pounds of bacon in your meat drawer. This is, yeah, you get dinged.
So I mean, obviously that's a thing, right?
Terrifying to me.
Because they have those fridges that manage your inventory and order shit for you now.
Yeah. Then they have a camera on the inside so you can remotely see what's in it, and it like checks it to like do like image recognition to tell you what you're running low on. That's terrifying to me.
And then Amazon will actually bring the stuff into your house and put it in your fridge for you.
Yeah. And Amazon has that thing they want to push through now with the door unlocking mechanism. So if they're at the door, it'll unlock if it's Amazon. Why would anyone think that was a good idea? I mean, it's just begging for so many lawsuits against Amazon by itself, let alone the other security ramifications. Holy moly. It makes me want to be running a 1950 Dodge truck and like a old-fashioned deadbolt in my door and a giant dog for security. Like, it makes me want to just go off the grid. Oh my God. Oh my God. I am the most cranky old man Luddite of technology people in the world. Before we head off into the sunset here, show him your shirt, Paul. You got a delightful shirt on today.
I'll stand up so you can see it.
Oh yeah, the Lulzbot shirt. You can't go wrong with that. One of the other sponsors of this show. Here's the thing, and I've said this before and I'll say it again. The only people that get to sponsor this show are cool people that love the free software and the open source, and the Lulzbot people do. And I've mentioned this the last couple of days, but I think it's really rad because I don't like changing the print heads. But the Lulzbot Aerostruder tool head, the new one here. So each tool head, if you don't do a lot of 3D printing, really has its own common purpose. Like some of them are dual tool head that I kind of showed last week that can print like support material and stuff like that at the same time. The Aerostruder tool head can support one at a time, but both like PLA, nice firm stuff, or like more Ninja Flex type material, more rubbery stuff, all from the same tool head, which is rad. They have versions for their mini and their bigger one, which is totally rad. You can find them over to lowspot.com and System 76. So let's say, for example, you don't need one of the best servers on the planet, which of course you'd go to Pogo Linux for. What if you instead want a super itty bitty mega tiny 4-inch cube on your desktop? System 76 has got you covered, and they're running Linux too. I'm thinking about grabbing one of these Meerkats for my. I haven't decided for sure exactly what I'm gonna do, but I need a new home theater machine. You know, I need something new. I've been using a Raspberry Pi, and those are fine. Those are fine, but they're not uber beefy. You know what I mean? Like as soon as you sit down and start playing a lot of high def material, sometimes the Raspberry Pi stutter a bit. The games I just can't go too extreme on them. But one of these little Meerkats, especially the really small one, they come like in little thin model and a slightly bigger model, man, would just make a great little set-top box. You know, stream whatever streaming service I want on it, have a nice little wireless keyboard where I can lay in bed with it. That seems like the way to go for me. I haven't decided yet, but I'm thinking that's the way to go.
Well, the cool thing is those boxes have a really cool fit and finish, so it can sit in your home theater, you know, cabinet and not look bad.
Yeah, they look nice.
They look like a little device.
Yes,
so that's cool. Yeah.
Exactly, and you pair them up with like I've got that little game controller up there, a little wireless game controller. So you don't have a nest of wires. I can get a little wireless keyboard, little wireless game controller, sit on my couch, lay in my bed. And if I've got a 1080p screen, well, that means I've got a 1080p screen that I can load up my web browsers, load up everything else, and I can do whatever I want. And I'm real tempted to go that route. I haven't taken the plunge yet, but I'm tempted to. Also, I'd be remiss if I did not point out that if you go to lunduke.com, you can now buy t-shirts. T-shirts both support the show and look really fancy on. In fact, the two t-shirts I'm highlighting today is this one that has some code on it. This is the AMD vendor CPU insecure bit of code, which just made me giggle a lot, so I have to put on a code. And also the main function from main.c from Linux 0.01 you can now get on a t-shirt. Those of you seeing the screen right there watching the video version, you see it's like 10 lines of code. I stripped out all the comments. There was a bunch of comments that Linus himself wrote, and I wanted to fit them all on the t-shirt, but I realized if you did that, the code extended all the way down past your belly button, and I felt like it was weird walking around with code on your belly. Like it felt weird. So I stripped out the comments, but there you go. That's what the main function of Linux looked like when it was very first released. So if you want that on your chest, telling all the ladies who's got game, that's the t-shirt for you. You can get over at lunduke.com. Here's the show schedule for the coming up week. Paul, thank you so much for joining me today. Anything exciting happening over at Pogo right now? You guys doing anything totally cool and righteous?
Well, we spent the holidays moving to a new facility, so we are still kind of living out of boxes, so to speak.
It's all right. It happens. I know how it goes.
But we're slowly getting tuned into our new digs, and so everything in that regard is going really well. And then we're going to be. I'm launching a new suite of products based on Ceph clusters. So I'll show you that. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I've got it's kind of a Halo product, but we're looking at being able to do clusters upwards in the range of 30, 40 petabytes. So I want to be able to, we'll be publicizing that pretty soon. It's early info now, but it's going to be awesome, baby.
Oh, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued. I used to do a little bit of work with Ceph. Are you guys going to base it like on RHEL or Fedora or something along those lines?
It'll sit on RHEL.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. For those not familiar with that acronym, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. That's kind of the de facto for Ceph at this point. I mean, I used to be an OpenSUSE guy. I used to be in marketing for OpenSUSE, and yeah, you can run OpenSUSE and have SUSE Linux Enterprise and have Ceph on it as well. But stuff's actually developed over at Red Hat. In large part, they own it, so that kind of does make a certain amount of sense. Yeah, that's kind of the way I'd go too. Sorry to my SUSE buddies on that one. All right, sounds awesome. Thank you again for joining me, Paul. Pleasure as always, and totally awesome purple background that you guys have got going on now. I dig it. I dig it utterly and completely. All right, everybody. Tune in tomorrow. It's Linux Day. I'll see you then.